Do you know?
To remind her to do better too.
Do you have the time?
It's 7.
It's 7, thank you. Oh, I can't see it. Thank you.
Thank you.
You can't see it.
Excuse me, ma'am, who are you?
I'm Karen. I'm just I live in town.
Okay, just town thing.
Not meeting. Shoot.
Just shoot.
I'm just curious.
Thank you for checking.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. It is, the appointed hour has arrived at 7 p.m. according to my timepiece here. And thanks for coming to this select board meeting on September 16th. Which includes a public hearing, public forum, whatever you want to call it, to try to get some ideas on what we need for senior services in Ashfield. Knowing that it's difficult for a lot of people to be prompt, I'd like to hold off on the public hearing for just a few minutes while you see us do the very strenuous work of paying the bills and approving some minutes from prior meetings.
Make a motion when we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. See, that's how difficult that all is. That didn't burn up a lot of extra time, did it?
I could have talked slower.
You could have done it. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, well, thanks for showing up and taking some interest in what we're going to be discussing tonight. This hearing, Lindy, you want just a minute here before we get started?
Before we get started, I wanted to make an announcement. I'm doing this for our police chief, Beth Bazzaio. She wanted you folks to know that on Friday, October 4th, there's going to be a food clinic here in Ashfield at the Congregational Church from noon until 2 p.m. And it's co-sponsored by the police department and the Ashfield Council on Aging. And at the back of the room, there is more information. There are some flyers and a sign-up sheet, and I guess there's a little form that you have to bring if you come for a food shop. So you can find out more there, okay?
Thanks, Lindy. So, Kyle, what do you need?
If folks can sign in, you're going to have everybody sign in before the release.
Or they can sign out. If you haven't signed in, feel free to sign out. Get that guy to sign in right away. So, a little background. Oh, I need to announce that we have one recording device in the hall today, so we're being videotaped, so I have to clean up my act. If anybody doesn't know who I am, I'm Tom Carter. I'm it this year. I'm the select board chair To my right is Steve Goodgen, he's our vice chair, and to my left is Todd Owen, who was just a member. What a great place to be.
Right?
What a great place to be.
What was it about never being a member of any organization that would have you as a member?
That's right, there you go. The Finance Committee, there's 4 Finance Committee members here. Lindy Goodgen, the chair. Carl Satterfield, Kyle Taylor, and I'm missing one.
Right here.
Oh.
Right here.
Oh, my George. So, thanks for being here. The reason for this tonight came out of a discussion that's been a long time coming, trying to figure out what the senior center that we belong to in Shelburne Falls. Anybody that's not aware, it's a real consortium of 3 towns. It's Ashfield, Buckland, and Shelburne. Trying to decide what's needed for extra services and especially extra room that doesn't have there. I was reading through some articles and minutes not too long, actually this weekend, it said it really started from there just aren't enough restrooms. For as busy as the place is, there just aren't enough restrooms. There aren't enough private places to do counseling and a lot of things like that. So trying to develop a plan that all 3 towns can get their arms around to move forward on a project. Now, anybody that's been following this project very much knows that, or if you've been in any kind of project, on any kind of group, when you come up with a plan, it's pretty easy for somebody to walk in at the 11th hour and tear it down and say, well, this is a much better place than this place. If you've been following around, there's been quite a bit of that going on. So a month, maybe 6 weeks ago, the folks that we have in Ashfield that are advisory or on the committee for the expansion committee and at the senior center came in and really we had the discussion about being frustrated that after 4, maybe 5 years of working on trying to get something going to expand the senior center and decide what services are needed and so forth, that they were getting really frustrated that things just weren't moving forward and wondering at some point would they go forward at all. And trying to nail down numbers from the Finance Committee and the Select Board's position. We have been quite supportive of moving forward. 2 years in a row that we've asked the town and town meeting to vote $15,000 each year just as an exploratory fund. Doing really the same thing that Buckland and Shelburne have done. We were really supposed to do it again this year. The budget, we were trying to make the budget stay within the mustard and the mayonnaise, the lines that we have to work within. And so we kind of put that off until November, December when we normally true up the budget. What our expenditures can be. So at this meeting a month, 6 weeks ago, where we talked about the frustration of the folks in Ashfield that have been working so hard on it, we did have some numbers from the senior center that talked about if they went through an expansion, which may be $3, $4, $5 million, if the town's portion was, or if the 3 towns' portions was $1 million, they were projecting that Ashfield would be $350,000. So the idea of this forum really comes from the idea, or the simple question, that if we had $350,000 available, is it in the best interest of the town of Ashfield to spend it in Shelburne Falls on what might at some time be an expanded senior center? Or is it better to take that $350,000 and invest it here in town in some type of project related to seniors? One of the things we came up with was maybe trying to move forward on some senior housing, maybe other investments. Doesn't necessarily mean that we were thinking of walking away from the senior center and the services that are there now. Just trying to get a handle on where the best place to employ that kind of money. So it's pretty simple math. If the 3 towns had to pay $1 million, our share would be $350,000. If the 3 towns had to put in $2 million, our share would be $700,000. Just looking forward on what folks in Ashfield think they're going to need in the future for services. Sometimes, George, want to advance? I thought you were good with this stuff. So, for the past number of years when we're putting together the budget, I'm just trying to get you to go through some of our thought process. Boy, you're moving ahead. It's doing it on its own, sorry. So several years ago, the Finance Committee and the Select Board, during the budget process, we said, we get all these things, you know, people come in with thousands of ideas, hundreds of ideas.
Do you have an automatic? Sorry.
I'll come talk to you.
And all these ideas on what to do, it's almost like black flies in June. And so we said we really need to prioritize what we want to spend money on. You know, the big number things, the things that are going to make a big difference in Ashfield. Then at that point it was broadband, bridges, and I just called it buildings. But you know, we were working on the broadband project. That was our #1. Bridges, right? We knew we had one bridge that was in decay, and as far as I can tell, talking to the guys this morning, by the end of the week, it should be, for all practical purposes, done. The paving will be done, and there'll just be a little cleanup. So that'll be one bridge out of the way. Now we can move on to the next one. But we're actively working on that. Trying to take care of the town hall. It's just building repairs for the steeple and so forth. Belding library roof. This was 19, so let's scratch that one off. We actually got a project completed, so that's wonderful. We had a big salary adjustment. We felt there was a priority to get that done. That one is done. We were able to buy a dump truck, and we started putting some money away for a fire truck. And then so down here is the senior center expansion, and we did throw that $15,000 in 19, which we did in 18. So it was on the list. It was just talking about senior needs wasn't very high on that. This is some of the money we spent last year on capital. We've kind of gone over this before. They're really in these, what we've already appropriated is nothing for senior services. Go ahead. But it is on, as I mentioned before, when we go back in November, December, hopefully there'll be some more money available on our levy. And we do have at least this $15,000 if the town decides to move forward that we can appropriate. We just didn't feel we had that kind of a money available when we went before the town. So, most of you have read the Ashfield News. It was a great article, and I'm not going to take any I didn't have a whole lot of input in it. Lindy, I think you wrote most of it. You and Carol put this together.
Yep.
These are some of the things we want to talk about, you know, senior housing. You know, should we be planning some? One of the things that really brings that to mind is those of us that get to drive through Goshen and see here in the last 2 years, I mean, I took them more than that to plan for it, but in the last few years, what they've been able to do to put some really nice senior housing that I think fits that community pretty well. Of course, I'm not living in that community. You know, should we put more support to age in place, where people may not need to move to housing, but, you know, would like some help where they are now? And, you know, at what level do Ashfield residents support the ownership of the center in Shelburne? And just trying to get some ideas where we need to go. You know, are we missing out on some outreach services, or is that one of the things that we'd really like to expand on, and what vehicle would we use for that? Transportation, health and wellness, beyond the flu clinic, and where should the services be? So one of the really big things before I got here tonight I thought about is I think this is great that the select board and the finance committee, when we're trying to keep all these balls in the air and move everything forward, is that we don't get stuck in some type of paradigm where this is the way we do things, so we're just going to keep marching on, and, you know, if somebody's leading us that way, that's an easy way to go. Personal story on that, but the idea is, you know, is that my wife said she needed a car. We talked about it briefly one night, and a couple of days later I said, well, I bought you a new car. And she likes the car all right, but boy, am I sick of hearing that it doesn't have this package and it doesn't have that package. So I'd like everybody to think about tonight as an expanded discussion, so we have some idea when we're trying to chew all through this, that wherever we're going, and it may be 5 or 10 years from now, hopefully not that long, but as we move towards something, that it's something that the town feels like they've had input on. So I'm chairing the meeting tonight. I'd really like to stay away from discussion back and forth in the hall. If you know, address me, address the board, and then if somebody can answer it or we can give some input, but really, we'd like the information to come this way. Vanna White is over here with a marker on the whiteboard. So really big ideas, you know, she can kind of list them up there. I'd like to keep it to an hour. Definitely, I would like us to be done with this by 8:30, unless we're having just such a super good time. And just kind of share your ideas on where you'd like us to go. I think I've covered most of that. It's a time for Ashfield residents to share with us give us some direction on where we'd like to go. Who'd like to start? I've talked enough. Don't be bashful. This is your question.
Thank you. I am fortunate that I can still drive. I don't know what I'd do if I couldn't drive, because there is no alternative here. I think a lot of attention should be given to transportation. A lot of attention. There must be other people who have not yet had to go into assisted living, but who won't be able to hang on if they can no longer drive.
So your biggest thing is just
No,
the fear or maybe the inevitability of someday not being mobile on your own and knowing what transportation options are there.
Well, there are none, are there?
Yes, there are. Yes, there are. And maybe we need to do a lot better job of explaining that
Yes.
in general to the entire population.
Yeah. Especially if you're going to spend $250,000 on the steeple.
Please, those would be necessary.
Let's not confuse one with the other.
Okay.
You know, let's try to.
I agree. I shouldn't have said that.
That's fine. That's fine. Carl.
There's a comment about transportation. There is a 5-6 method for transportation that will almost get you anywhere you need to be. You have to take 5 steps to your telephone, lift it up. You have to press 6 numbers to get to the senior center, and they will arrange, or 5 numbers, whatever, and they will arrange for transportation for you. They will come to your very door and pick you up. My mother-in-law was staying with us for a while when she could, and they would come right to the door, and in some instances where she needed the help, they would walk up the steps and help her down to the van. They would bring her back. Transportation is available to do some shopping. Transportation is available to go to doctors, to go to activities that are not at the center. So I hope that you feel somewhat relaxed with regard to the issue of transportation. It is available for you. It's available when you feel you need it. And all you have to do is go to the telephone and call the senior center, and they will arrange to come for you every week to help you do whatever it is that you feel is important for you to do.
So,
You're welcome.
What I'm taking away from it is, I'm not sure how many people realize that, and maybe we need to do a better job of publicizing. Next.
One thing I would like to add to what he just said was, yes, it is available, but I think it's either, you have to give a certain number of hours or days ahead of time in order to schedule that transportation.
It takes a certain amount of planning.
Yes.
It takes a certain amount of planning. Yeah,
Can people say their names as they talk?
that'd be a great idea. That'd be a great idea. Stand if you can and state your name. That'd be great.
Jody Hall. I'm just on the transportation thing. Having experience with my mother-in-law, it is true that it is available, but it's not reliably available. There are, and I don't know what the current situation is. It's a function of how many drivers are available, and so I'm not, I think there could be some improvement there. Maybe there has been, because it's been at least 7 years since we've had experience with it.
Sure. Sure. Now it's yours.
Okay.
Can you
This is
stand,
a-
Cindy, and state your name?
Cindy Carney. This is a meeting for senior citizens. Can we have what's written on that board put in black so that all of us can read it? I don't know if I have black.
Yeah. Steve.
Steve Zamoyski. We now have 3 buses and a minimum of 3 to 4 drivers that are qualified. And it is fairly reliable, but you can't call up at 10 o'clock in the morning and expect a bus to be there. A day ahead, a couple, as far ahead as you can plan. Say you got a doctor's appointment next week. You call up today and the doctor's appointment say, I need to go to my doctor, such a time, such a place. Can you please have a bus? Yes. That helps. A lot of people will call up the same day and go, I need to go to the doctor today. They will try if they can, but sometimes they can't because they're already committed to all other people. But there is plenty of transportation. When you do come up here, you're taken to, I think it's Big Y in Greenfield once a week. And they also make a Walmart run, I think it's once a month. So, you can get around.
Yes.
My name's Sally Yates. All my doctors are at Berkshire Medical Center, and I believe there's no transportation to Berkshire County. So why is there transportation to Northampton if there's no to Berkshire County?
Does anybody have a brief answer to that?
Very quickly. Our notes to Councilman, Our buses are from the Franklin Regional Transit Authority in Springfield. And they are contracted to Franklin County. We cannot go to, we can't go to Hampshire County or to Springfield. If you need that, you have to call the Franklin Regional Transit Association themselves. They will come and get it.
But we do go to Northampton once a month to the
Yes.
Walmart. Okay, well, still Hampshire County, so there's, yes, ma'am.
My name is Evelyn Rush, and this has nothing to do with transportation, but there are two things I would love to see. Some sort of snow removal service that was available specifically for seniors and was moderately priced, and that they could sign up the season ahead so that people could get out. And then the other thing is, as a healthcare provider myself, who has prescriptive authority, I'm more than happy to be able to be located somewhere in town to see people on some regular basis. And if there were other prescribers in town and healthcare providers, it would be really nice to be able to provide that in town. So if something happened, people didn't have to drive out to see someone, in Hampshire, even in Franklin County and Greenfield.
So healthcare access
Healthcare
in
access
town.
in town. At least, I realize we may not be able to do something every single day, but maybe we can have something 3 mornings a week.
Maybe more often than once a year flu clinic.
Yeah, exactly. And something bigger than the flu clinic.
Who's the next one? Tirza.
Hi, here's Leah Schwartz. I'm a senior citizen. I use the services that we have now. So these are just quick ideas and responses. At 10 years is much too long to wait for whatever it is that we're going to do. We may not be here. Transportation, I think we need to figure out a way to go across county lines more. I think that's really important if it's Berkshire, if it's Hampshire, because my doctor's in Northampton and Williamsburg. I think we actively need to inform people proactively about what services there are already currently available. I don't think people are aware, and I think there's a lot that's offered and people need to know. I think we need senior housing. I want to see people be able to age gracefully in place in this community and continue to live here with the supports that they need. And senior housing is one way to keep people in the community and really important. The facilities at the current center are not adequate. That's clear. We need to figure out what we can do. We currently spend $30,000 something a year annually. I believe that's our contribution to the senior center. So if we're talking about other things, we need to figure out how we're going to pay for that. And I would like to see us, two things. One thing on transportation is that for some of us, depending on where we live in town, it takes almost as long to get to Shelburne Falls as it does to get into town. Do you know what I mean? It just depends. But I'd like to see us think creatively about approaches of working maybe with the current senior center so that that's a hub, but we have more resources here as well. I attend the Healthy Bones class. People volunteer to do that. It's fabulous. Thursday, 9:30 to 10:30. If you want to join us, there's no charge. Those kinds of different things, more intellectual kinds of things in addition to exercise for activities, those are some of my thoughts.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, let me direct the discussion just a little bit. Let's put up housing, senior housing. What are some more, just thinking about senior housing, it seems though we've already mentioned a couple of different times here, there's senior housing and then there's this idea of trying to make it so to age in place. And in my mind, I'm thinking of two different things. One's a support service and the other is actually a building that you can go pound nails into. So let's talk about the pound and nails part of it. I mean, what do we see as a need or a want, I guess? We have to segregate those out. Judy?
Judy helped. I was on the planning board for 10 years, and we struggled to find an area in the village and proposed reduced setbacks and that sort of thing to make it fit. And unfortunately, we didn't come up with something that would fit, that would be approved by the villagers. So, and that took most of the 10 years that was gone. So therein lies one problem. If we want to be in town, close to services for seniors with a sidewalk and parking, similar to what Goshen and Worthington has done, we need to put more effort into making that happen.
Any other discussion on housing? Let's try to talk about housing. Cass?
Well, I've got comments on each of these categories, but as far as senior housing goes...
This is Cass Naraki, anybody that's taking
notes. And a lot of what I have to say has more to do with pulling back from the senior center idea and more in terms of community building and basically doing more in the community for, you know, for lots of things, including senior housing. And I wrote, I would prefer to see the town providing economic and other incentives, support and encouragement for homeowners to provide accessible, age-friendly housing in town, especially in the center. And that would include, you know, rental units and so on. Because I guess I'm really shying away from the idea of the town expending very large amounts of taxpayer money, both, you know, even in grant funds for even things like senior housing as well as senior centers, big new buildings.
So what I'm hearing you say is you're all for a big project as long as we can do it for nothing. I'm just trying to repeat back what I'm hearing, I'm just checking my understanding.
That is correct.
I applaud it, I really do.
Well, I'm not saying things are free, but
No.
you know, there's a lot more to my ideas. But, yeah.
I appreciate it. Mr. Murray.
Ted Murray, in terms of senior housing, one possibility might be to develop the kind of a building which could accommodate, let's say, a small cluster of condos or apartment type units instead of the separate houses you see in Goshen. And in that same building, have a degree of kind of common space which could be used by the residents of that place, such as a common room, maybe some kitchen facility, a couple of bathrooms on, let's say, a first floor if the units were up above. And that space might also be usable by others, senior citizens, for a variety of purposes, or others for that matter in the community. That's a different kind of a model than having separate housing and a separate senior center, but sort of blend them somehow.
Who's next? Anybody else when we're talking about housing? Nancy.
Nancy Hoff. I'm wearing my Ashfield Community Preschool hat. I'm on the board and have been for a number of years and have been willing to offer for, I think, a reasonable fee our side lot at the preschool site. That I've had a vision for 15 years of an intergenerational compound where we could have housing and maybe a garden as a common space, and the kids can go over and be read to, or the seniors can come to the preschool and read to them, or we learn a song, or we garden together. I don't know, but I think it's a vision that I've had for many years. It never leaves, so I think there's some value to it. It hasn't grown old on me, and we would like to just put that in the mix. We did put it in the mix a bit ago, and then it turned into rumor that the preschool was closing, and the town was going to try to buy out the preschool. So I wanted to dispel that rumor now. The preschool is fine, but we do find that and feel that if we could sell our side lot, that could provide a stability into the next several years, which we're trying to do with changing populations and fluctuations. So let it be known that lot is available, the town has first dibs on it, and I think it could be a good site that is accessible to the village.
Any other discussion on housing? Jackie?
Yes, Jacqueline Bergen on Briartown Road. I worked at Hilltown CDC for 13 years. Hilltown CDC was the organization that pulled together the senior housing in Goshen. Most recently, we were involved with many projects throughout the hill towns. I worked on projects in Worthington, Cummington, West Hampton, many. The first step, I think, would be to apply for funding for a feasibility study. Unfortunately, the town of Ashfield isn't high up there in terms of being eligible for a lot of the block grants because our community need score is higher, or lower actually, than what is needed.
Per capita income.
Yes, and you can still, that doesn't mean you can't apply, it means you probably want to go in with other communities who have a higher need score. That raises the eligibility. Senior housing is much more complicated than most people realize. It takes years. It takes funding from a numerous variety of funders. Each one comes with their own rules and regulations. They'll tell you how big each space can be. They have something to say about everything. We're talking federal funding mixed with state funding, perhaps, local funding. It's a big deal. And I can tell you that Goshen took a long time to pull it off, but they did it. Goshen, unfortunately for us, fortunate for them, had a better need score. They qualified much more easily than I think the town of Ashfield might. Now, that's not to say as our population is changing and aging, maybe things are worth taking another look at in the town of Ashfield. So Ashfield isn't in the jurisdiction of Hilltown CDC for everything. It is for a lot of outreach services through like the Worthington Health Center. There are different programs that they get funding for, and I would recommend a phone call to Dave Christopoulos, who's currently the executive director there, to see what Ashfield might go in on. And as far as a feasibility study, if we may or may not be able to do it. I mean, the position I used to hold there doesn't exist anymore, but there's through the Franklin County Housing and Development Authority, you can go there and there may be somebody that could assist with a feasibility study through them. But that's block grant money primarily for feasibility studies. So just a
Anything else on housing? Anybody else?
Back to someone said earlier about having someone help with shoveling and those types of things. My mom lives down in Connecticut, now it's a much bigger town, but she's had some assistance with like, the football team will come out and help with yard work and those types of things. So that might be something to have the high schoolers do some service. And that, that's just an idea.
Community service. All right, what else would we want to discuss? How about if we just pull apart that healthcare access? What would people envision or need or think about as far as healthcare access? Judy.
Judy Howe. Some years ago, Brenda was housed in the Ashfield house as a satellite provider. I think she was here 3 days a week until they lost that funding for that position. People loved her, and she was able to do walk-in simple emergency things as well as primary care. I don't know how to get that started or funded again.
But she was housed in the Ashfield house, and it was a good plan.
Sal?
Could they use the downstairs of the library for that? Since they have elevators and everything there too?
Possibility, I suppose. We get that far down, somebody'd have to know a library trustee to ask. Anything else on that? I mean, general sense?
Dave Messenger, more and more we're seeing the medical needs be met with Skype. The VA does that now. I don't have to drive all the way down or ride my bike down to Northampton. And if it's something serious that's wrong, they call a bus, whatever, an ambulance. It's a real cheap way to talk to a doctor. I like to talk to doctors anymore. We all talk to healthcare providers. Guys that really know what's going on. Anyway, so that's a thought, which changes the modality of the physical building. A lot of this stuff can be done virtually, I think. Also, I was thinking about the housing. The concept of a halfway house, call it the rest of the way house, if you will. But because somebody should make something official, get grants and stuff, you got to get swingers, you got to do this, you got to have ADA. Maybe get a bunch of healthy people. We don't want ADA access at this point, And like-minded people house. This is already going on to a certain extent. Leanne down there at the senior center hooks people up longer, just creates, finds people that want to share buildings. Somebody's got some really these big old houses that way, which addresses some of the housing thing.
Nancy?
Still on the local health clinic idea, I know that there are members of our local board of health who are seriously looking at this and been talking about it a long time. So maybe if a group of us just went to the board of health and said, hey, we're on, we'd like to do this. I think it does, snags get in the way. Where they do it, how often, but anyway, the board of health is on the same page on this. So let's get those two pages together.
So I never get a crowd together. Actually, there's normally a crowd of one. I mean, we were able to fill a school committee seat. We're actively looking for someone to fill a board of health seat. So we're just pop your hands up and we'll certainly discuss that. We'd be glad to fill some of these positions, no doubt. So.
Nina Kohler, I'm not volunteering for Board of Health, not my line. But it does say here in this great brochure that they have many health services at the senior center. And the thing that I really like, that I would use a lot, would be Ask the Nurse. So you can go there and have your blood tested, you can check your glucose, there's all these great things. So it seems to me that here we have something that we're paying for that is a functioning entity. And if you try to duplicate that, yeah, but if you try to duplicate that, then you're paying for it twice. And they do such a great job. I mean, they've been doing it for how many years now? And there's transportation to it. So I hesitate to say, let's duplicate what they already do down here. I think they're doing an awesome job. Senior housing is another thing. I think it'd be nice to have senior housing in town. So I vote for looking into senior housing and throwing our money at the regional senior center.
Mr. Whitlam, you've been very quiet tonight.
How fortunate can you be? Franklin Whitlam, Council on Aging, and also very much a senior in my mid-80s. I'd love to see more health care here, but look around. Towns are, in this area, are 4,000 people short of primary care doctors. How is Ashfield, when you can't get them for Shelburne, for Greenfield, you can't get them for Northampton, going to attract really advanced care beyond what we get occasionally at the center.
Takes more than good looks and a sense of humor, doesn't it?
About $80,000 a year.
So as somebody who does primary care and also knows that there's, value in virtual visits, I think that the hybrid model is really our best bet, and in part, it's because even for me, who uses an electronic medical record all the time and e-prescribes and knows how to find my way through technology, a lot of that stuff is very overwhelming and intimidating, and it doesn't work consistently, and all of us know when we have bad snow or whatever. And the other thing is that there is nothing that will replace the brains in my hands. And so when I can put my hands on somebody, or when I can see them and I can tell what's going on by looking at them or touching them, that's really different than calling for a virtual doc or advanced practice nurse to get a prescription filled. So I think there's a place for both things, and I do think that, I do use a virtual service, for example, for nutrition counseling for myself, but when I don't feel well and I think that I'm wheezing, they're not going to be able to listen to my lungs through the computer. So advanced practice nurses are going to save the American healthcare system. I'm one of them. I live in Ashfield. I want to die here. Hopefully not for quite a while. Maybe if I have my own place, I can come see myself. But anyway, I just think that there's a way that we can do a combination of this, and it doesn't have to be as daunting. But it's true. There are fewer and fewer people that know how to do primary care. But you're not going to get the same kind of, oh boy, we need to get you in right now, or no, you're okay, let's let this wait for another day until you have your appointment, if we're going to do it completely virtually.
David? Seems like I'm going around the room. There's a whole bunch of you in here, and you can all speak. Go ahead, David.
Dr. Goff, what she said there, virtual tour, the virtual thing, if you think about it, I cut my hand. If I could get a doc looking at it, he said, get down here right away. Instead of, what I did is, come on, Don, drive you down there to the hospital, which is what, or going to a physical place like that. It's an immediate thing. Also, I think the VA, especially in the psychiatric areas and stuff, they don't mind seeing sort of the conditions behind where you are. Because basically, you turn on your computer, you hit a button there, and you're talking to them. And they're looking at you too, at your living conditions, basically. It's good. I know that we live in a society where all that's been compromised and exploited, but it does have a safety factor there. And that's,
Carl?
Carl Satterfield, 2 points. I think it's helpful if we take some of the ideas that we have coming out this evening and perhaps in the future, and if we find that there is a desire for something that is partially provided by the senior center that's already in existence, that we support that function so that it can continue along and maybe expand beyond where it's operating now. If there's something like health is an issue, that we communicate to the senior center what some of these health issues are and see if the senior center is available and can provide that service, which it does not provide now. I think long-term success is going to be achieved by supporting an existing arrangement supported by 3 towns. So the money doesn't have to all come from Ashfield, it's coming from 3 towns, and to provide those services for our citizens as well as other citizens. I think there's value in talking to people in other towns, going and visiting and sitting down and laughing and what have you with people in other towns. My second point is, I think it's very important that regardless of which route you take, going off in whatever direction it is, that you make a special effort to, in effect, show the respect and wisdom to the seniors in our community and have them strongly involved in the discussions for implementing it and the planning of it so that it represents not what the Finance Committee might think is possible or the Board of Selectmen might think is possible or advisable, but the people in the community that have been living in this community for many, many years, obviously much longer than I have, and have worked to support all the things that the community has now. Those things didn't come about by themselves. All the things that we take for granted or enjoy in the community is the result of your effort, and that's important. And I think you deserve the respect, and the town observes your wisdom to incorporate that. And I think that's a real strong element that you need in whatever it is, in whatever direction you're moving.
Tirza again.
We tend to, get these services, so we go to Franklin County, the Franklin County Center Children Falls site. But I have a friend that runs the senior housing in Worthington, for example, and she's developing more services. And so I wonder, why can't we also collaborate with Williamsburg, because they might have one of our needs, or with Goshen or somewhere else, and so just broaden our hub so that it's multifaceted. And yes, that might cost money, but again, we're paying $30,000 a year for Shelburne Falls. And if we look at doing everything ourselves, it's going to cost much more, but it may not cost that much more. It's worth exploring. What is in Williamsburg? What is in Cummington? Those are our surrounding towns. What is in Goshen? Can I go to the foot clinic there? Can I go to the eye clinic here? So on.
Cass?
Yeah, I totally agree with Tirza Lee if we just sort of go with the senior center model and go ahead and co-own a new senior center with them, then that will tie our hands in terms of money. And I agree that it makes sense to look farther and wider, not only within our own community, but also in other communities as well, who might be wanting to do the same kinds of things.
So, I think that's a great discussion, and if you ever want to see me at my worst up here, is have the police and the fire come in and talk about radios and how we have difficulty talking to Goshen because of the county line, that they have a different system than we do. And I've heard that for 35 or 40 years. It drives me out of my mind. But dogs have nothing on the rest of us as far as marking their territory. And trying to get everybody to work across these artificial boundaries, it's difficult. I think that is going to be a big shift in thinking, and I see some of that happening in some of the other communities with services. So, I think that's a very interesting point.
So my name is Renee Rastacker, and I think the idea of getting some of these services and looking to other places for these services, to me it just feels like it's energy dispersed and somewhat lessened, as opposed to having our energy concentrated. I really like what you said about, if we want things from the senior, I should also say I want the Senior Foundation Board, which is the fundraising arm of the Senior Center. But I think that, this is our senior center, or it is our senior center. So if there's things that we're not getting, we can be active about asking for it. I mean, it's our money as much as anybody's. And also I think that I kind of can tell that people are not as familiar as they might be about what kinds of services are offered to them. I think that maybe that's something that the senior center can do a better job of publicizing. But the one thing that I really believe about the senior center as it is now and the model that exists now is that I think you can't say too much for having people coming together, sharing meals together, sharing activities together, sharing problems together, and that's something that happens the days that the senior center is open. It's a very vibrant place, and one of the things that happens to people as they age, when we're in situations like ours, rural settings, it can be very isolating. So yeah, you can have a health place here in Ashfield, but I feel like that's a large part of what people need as they age is not addressed by that. The social needs that we have, need to be, are really important and can be very devastating if they're not addressed. So I really support, I haven't heard anything that makes me think that, I'm sure I support senior housing, but I haven't heard anything that makes me think that we can establish here in Ashfield the same kinds of services that already exist and that we are already paying for. Thank you.
Yes. Dr. Duncan, I think I sound a little bit like an old curmudgeon, a senior curmudgeon. But take us back to, I thought, one of the major topics tonight, which is, do we support huge amounts of funding to support this three-town new center? And I guess I'm going to say that I don't. I would rather see us work within the community. There's just, we can have meals together. We can do all kinds of things together. We can help, I know a number of people here who help their neighbors for 10 years get to doctor's appointments and do the shopping and do all that without charging all the other taxpayers in town for helping a neighbor. I don't understand why. I feel that maybe seniors are a little bit self-indulgent, thinking that they need special help now. Yes, we've chosen to live in this really beautiful area, and it has its problems. But, I probably volunteer to take somebody to a doctor's appointment, every so often, just as I did for my neighbor for years. I don't understand why we want to invest a lot of money in a building that we don't even own. It's not in our town. We do have to drive further afield for. Our economy, the world can't really handle more gas. I think we really need to focus on our town. And so, yeah, that's enough.
So, we just did a quick calculation, and it's not budget season, so I don't have all the numbers committed to memory, but we've talked about $30,000 that the town spends for the operating portion. I'm not exactly sure if that's correct, but
32,000 change.
all right, so out of a $5 million budget, that is 0.6% of our overall budget. So I'm just trying to put that in a little bit of context of how much we're spending on this project compared to what we spend on everything else. Just to throw that out there, because I'm a percentage kind of guy, I guess. Doug?
Just to get back a little bit about us here in Ashfield. Every month, we have a luncheon at the Congregational Church from 11 to 1. And we also go to the lake house, we're going to the lake house for Christmas lunch. That is done completely by the Ashfield Consolidation people, so that's nothing. And the Congregational Church hands us that building for nothing also. And also, just a second thought, on the outreach business, our outreach coordinator comes to Ashfield every first Thursday of every month at the St. John's Line and sits there for 2 solid hours, and nobody from Ashfield comes to see her.
It's totally, I can't accommodate that in my schedule.
Yeah, go ahead. Just mention who you are.
Oh, I'm Pamela Singler. I've been away for 40 years, just came back home recently. So yeah, everybody likes the first Thursday of the month. There are like 5 things that I would like to be involved in, but they all are choosing the first Thursday of the month. So I think in terms of accessing socialization, I'm supposed to stand up, and so once a month is wonderful, and I totally get what it takes for you all to make that happen. But I think what I'm hearing in terms of isolation, once a month is not going to cure isolation. When you're dealing with people who are isolated, they need to have contact 3 times a week. They need to be able to have that ability, whether it's somebody who just takes them out in their wheelchair to breathe fresh air for 5 minutes because they can't get out of the house on their own. So I haven't heard a lot about what happens with shut-ins. I would think that that's a huge factor. And I think I heard the answer because I've heard in other towns that people apply for block grants in order to be able to age in place in their homes, and it sounds like maybe Ashfield isn't eligible for that kind of thing. So how we come up with those creative solutions to do that, I personally think age in place is the way to go, and anybody who's doing any kind of new construction should think about their old age and, you know, just go for it from the beginning. And that might, you know, that's another intergenerational further on down the road. But for right now, trying to help people figure out how to age in place, because for my own sake, when I was nursing my mom, and at the end when it's getting really wild in the blood gases and they don't know what's going on, the thing that managed to calm her down was seeing the cast iron stove. You don't carry your cast iron stove from your home into senior housing. And you don't get that kind of resolution of anxiety and total bewilderment in senior housing. You get that because you're aging in place in your own home.
Joanne, you took the front seat. And I can't believe that you don't have something to offer.
I'll tell you that the senior center is very active and does have an awful lot to offer you. Please read the news, the Ashfield News, and the Recorder. I think, Casey, do they leave a pile of the monthly or the month? Yes. By the
No,
month.
they don't leave a pile, but you
But
get
anyway.
one or two, yeah.
I mean, just the.
If they publish it online, we could actually link to the online publication.
Super duper meals on Tuesday for $3. You can't believe it.
All right. Betty?
Betty Stewart. I have another issue. It's connected to housing. It's connected to aging in place. A couple of years ago, I broke my right hand.
Sorry, can you speak a little louder? Thanks.
2 years ago, I broke my hand. And it doesn't take very long before I was stir crazy. So I could leave my house, but then the sidewalk situation is abominable. I know you put in some money to do part of it, but that's not adequate. In order to leave my house, I can get up to the post office. If I have the next stop, the library, I have to go back across the street, go down on this side, then go back across where there's no crosswalk at the library. And then, I mean, it happens all the time. And then I have to do the research to come back or to go to any of these other places. It's got to be looked at more thoroughly, because if, like me, whole lots of other people want to age in place, you're just going to go crazy sitting in your house all the time if you can't get out. Winter is the worst time. Summertime, no problem. But it's something that should get looked at.
That 3 or 4 months of the year kind of rings us out, doesn't it? Does me. Every year I seem to get a little. If summer's only 6 weeks of bad snowmobiling, how before I go to Mr. Whitlam, anybody? Sally, you got something?
Yeah, just the other day, speaking of sidewalks, I was walking on one side of the street and this elderly lady was walking her dog on the other side, and she caught her foot on the frost heave hurts and went down really hard and got hurt. And I was wondering if there was some way of helping.
Some maintenance?
Yes.
We put it on the list. And anybody else that I haven't called on? That- Ron, I figured you were standing away from your wife for a reason.
Can you please enlighten me about if we invested $700,000 or $350,000 in a senior center, it's not a giveaway, right? It's equity. It's a transfer of equity. We would own a piece that I assume if we had a discussion 10 years down the road and wanted to go in another direction, we could sell that equity. Maybe not the grant portion, but the piece that the town commit. No.
It's like so many of these things. You can think you have equity, but try to sell it. And the agreement, you know, we have a good agreement as far as cost sharing on the operating portion, and taking this next step into a huge capital, we aren't there yet. I mean, there's the outline of what that's going to look like. You know, right now, for anybody that doesn't know, the senior center is really part of the town of Shelburne. So the money now funnels through the town of Shelburne into the senior center. Of course, it's rented. I mean, everything is operating expense now. There's no real huge amount of capital that's expended, but as they look forward to trying to construct something. But at some point, somebody has to decide where it's going to be and get something going. I mean, it's even me that drags my feet can get frustrated that somebody's always throwing in. I mean, I've been to the select board meetings in Shelburne, I've been to Buckland, and I told them, the one thing I know about this new senior center with 3 towns, it will not be in Ashfield. Not because we wouldn't love it in Ashfield, but how's everybody going to get from Shelburne and Buckland? And maybe that's part of the discussion we're having right now, is how many and what's our utilization of that. So, and just trying to figure out how it's going to work the best for the population. Would there be equity in it that could actually be cashed out? That's like saying we get our equity out of the Mohawk Trail Regional School District.
Well, as a follow-up to that question, Coleraine left the group a while ago. What if Coleraine came in to the group after the 3 towns built the facility? Then it shouldn't just be a usage fee that they pay. They should shoulder some of the past debt, right? There's some issues that are associated with financing.
A lot of the different proposed models that I've seen would provide for buy-ins from other towns.
Okay.
If they wanted to rejoin at some point.
Good.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, if we do go down that path, we'd be very hopeful that other towns would want to buy in and share that burden. Who knows if they ever would. But trying to sell that to get out, I don't know if you'd be able to find a buyer.
Okay. Thanks.
And who knows that far in advance what the environment's going to be for that. Steve.
Going back to the lady that said shut-ins. I don't know how many people know about it, but our police chief has an officer. If you call her, she will put you on the list. The officer will visit you once a week, or maybe even more often. She'll come in. Sometimes she even brings goodies from her vacation. So that's all. I don't know how many people know about that.
You mean Gretchen?
So I'm gonna embarrass some folks, and just since they made the trip, I'm just gonna ask them for some input. Rick Chandler, Do you have anything to offer on?
Rick Chandler. Let's see, in 1976, I moved to Ashfield with my parents and my grandparents. I was part of a senior center at that point, a multi-generational senior center. I also caused the school problem we have now by having 2 kids. And this is a cycle that we're going through. And right now, I think it's something over 60% of Ashfield is over the age of 60. And I'm 70, I never thought I'd get here.
Not yet.
Not yet?
There was a study a couple of years ago. Kathy came in and she said in 2020, we're going to go past 50%, we'll be over 60 in Ashfield. Which made me think, am I going to be that guy that takes us over the edge?
Yes, you could be. Plus, when you get older, the math gets funny.
The math.
Anyway, what concerns me is the investment in capital. I think we could all agree that 30,000 is a bargain. What could we do for 50,000? The problem is the space isn't big enough for the demand at the moment. And for this moment that we're in right now, which I don't know how long the window will be, but by golly, it better not be too long, because by the time we get all of us out of the room here, maybe there'll be some young folks that will move in. That's why I think broadband is in some ways more important than the senior center. Frankly, broadband is pretty important to seniors, more than some of us would like to admit. So I don't know, I don't have any problem with 30,000 or even 50,000 to support the senior center, that small percentage of the budget that you're talking about. But when they start buying buildings and building buildings and asking us for a third of the cost or whatever, in spite of the arrangements that you brought up, Ron, which they sound great on paper, but probably not going to work out in the end. I don't know if Colerain's going to be in the market when Ashfield doesn't want to do it anymore. You really have to start thinking about, well, what could happen to the sidewalks if we didn't spend that money? What could happen to some of the other things that impact seniors if we didn't spend that money, that capital money I'm talking about, not the support money? And so I guess my question is it either or? Are we at the point where we have to have this structure where the senior center is not going to continue to offer services? That's my big question.
I think that's why we put something up about a hybrid, that maybe we use services, but maybe in my mind, when I think about that, I'm thinking about maybe we don't need the infrastructure of the building as much as we need the service, and try to find a way to do that. Tirza.
Just 2 quick immediate points for the center. They don't have voicemail, I discovered the other day, so I had to leave a message for someone. To me, just seemed like using, staff time. I'd like to see them modernize that. They don't use email very much. I'd like them to see if we could get them to help expand that. I think that would help with outreach. And the other idea that I have, and I know it's been explored, but I'd like to see it reconsidered, is that Mohawk has empty space. And when I was at the meeting the other day for the senior center, I suggested that we take a section of Mohawk, which would cost much less. It's already built. Everyone would have to stretch, so Buckland would have to come over a little to Mohawk. We'd have to go a little, but it would cost much less. It meets fire and other kinds of things. I know there's questions about quarry and different things, but you can section off a wing, you can be very creative, and I think that could be a good solution for everyone. So I'm just putting it out.
George, you were here pretty early, sitting there quietly. Do you have anything to offer? Carl?
Well, Satterfield again, in terms of capital costs and the building, if you find that you put money into this structure and maintain it, and you don't need, as a town, or the towns don't need all of that, there's nothing to say you have a building already there that you can find an alternative use for the entire building or part of that building, rather than having to build a new building for a regional recreation center or a regional arts center or whatever it might be. The money has already been put into it. You've maintained it. And if it's not necessary for everything, you have still the asset there. You still have all that investment there for town usage. In terms of schools, I don't know what the state statutes are in terms of bringing different populations into a school. They may allow it, they may not allow it. I'm exhibiting my ignorance to you, but I'd be concerned about that, dealing with state control over public buildings and that kind of thing.
Lindy, do you have anything that you'd like to add? I know that you've put a lot of thought into this.
Well, I think that one of the concerns I have is that, yes, we will have an asset of a building if we go with a building project, but we also have the cost of upkeep in that building, and we don't know whether it's going to be useful for anything else in the long term, and it's most likely going to be in another town, so what sort of use will there be for Ashfield? And the other issue is, it's not just the capital costs of building the building, there will be the long-term operating costs, which are projected to be much higher, most likely, in a whole bigger building. So we have all of those costs to consider, along with, and it's why we're here tonight, what else do Ashfield seniors need? What else do we want in Ashfield for seniors? So all of those things have to come together, and we have to consider them before we can make a good decision for the town.
Well, I think it goes back to Cass's point, is that we want it all, but we really don't want to pay too much for it.
Yeah.
Which is normal. I mean, that's the normal case. So, listening to all of this, and as I often do, throw some mud at the wall and see if it sticks. Let's say we explored the senior housing and weren't able to qualify for whatever reason for the grants and so forth. There may have to be some cost share in that. But what would be the feeling in the room if $250,000 got put into making the community hall accessible and you having that available in town? Is there any sense of what, if we could pull services into the old Grange Hall, the community hall down here?
Put in an elevator. So you're talking about handicap access and parking?
If there was a way to make that, I mean, is there a general sense? I mean, we can hear you if you nod your heads.
Yes.
Available for what, for senior housing or?
No, for activities. Because there's a unit that's already constructed in town that would be accessible that, and I don't have anything to do with the community hall, except that I drive by quite often and feel that it's underutilized. So, Ricky, you have...
I think that's a great idea. I don't think it would take too much to do it.
Nina?
As the president of the Ashfield Community Hall, I do have something to say about it. All right, it's very Get up, please. There's someone in there every day. There are classes in there, and it's all generations, all ages. So if there's going to be things happening in the basement of the hall for seniors, because that's where it would have to be, they have to put up with a lot of noise, because there's bang, bang, bang from movement classes every day. It would take a lot of work, but I'd be willing to, I think we'd be willing to look into it, but it's a very small space. It's a lot smaller than what seniors have right now. So my question was, obviously they need to expand because the senior center is so heavily used. I'd like to know how many Ashfield residents use the senior center now. I think those people aren't here because they don't drive at night and they can't get out on their own. So I think they're underrepresented here, and I'd like to know how many actually use it.
There's all kinds of reports that we get from the senior center that document that. So Wayne?
Direct answer to that question, 180 seniors, separate seniors so far this year from Ashfield.
There were over 5,000, they count them as units of usage, so if
I'm just talking about
senior,
individuals at the moment.
so if a senior goes and attends a workshop, a class, a meal, it's counted as a separate unit of measure. and there were over 5,000 units of measure used by Ashfield people in the last year.
I'm just saying, there's not room for that in the community.
That's 18% of the total use of the community senior center now. Ashfield uses 18% of the total. Shelburne uses about 50%, and Buckland uses the other 30%.
We're talking about, 180 unique users.
Yeah,
out of
180 unique
800
users.
or so,
Residents.
Right,
6
Ashfield.
Yeah.
180 unique users utilizing it 5,000 times for different things.
Tia, quickly.
So one thing about the plan for the senior center that I learned from the meeting that I went to last week is that we're about 18-19% of their usage. Most of the people that use it are Buckland children. But that they're asking that we pay a third of the cost, I believe. So I think that's something. I don't think our usage is going to go up to a third. I think it might go up if we let people know more about services. So I think that's something really important to look at. In terms of the community center, I was there for a meeting the other day, and the mold issue is really bad, and I had to leave. So that in the basement, so that would cost $250,000 alone probably to, fix.
Well, we had a mold issue in the cellar here and it costs plenty of money, but it's still not cured because we can't move on. The idea of a third of the capital cost was something that somebody roughed out, that the committee roughed out, and it certainly isn't anything that we've agreed on to this point.
It was one of three different
options
that were outlined in the meeting last week.
Ricky, quick follow-up. I mean, it's 20 after, so we've been over an hour on this, so.
So just going back to the community center, community hall, to my thoughts are, I'm a senior. I'm going to my 50th high school reunion this week, and
She organized it.
But there's a number of places in town in Ashfield already where many events happen, whether it's the library or the community hall or some of the spaces in the churches and the town hall. And for my own things, I like to go to places where there's a mixture of ages and not necessarily just people over 65 or over 70. And I think that if we could put more money into making these buildings in town more accessible, then maybe some people who are getting older would be able to take part in more of the activities that are already happening. And that creates more things for seniors to do in town that they might not be able to do now. Now that doesn't solve all the issues, but if we're only 18% of the usage and we have to go 8 miles out of town to do things, then why couldn't we have them right in our own town to do in the first place?
Anybody else? What?
One thing that everybody tonight, and one thing that I keep coming back to Jan's house. The one thing that keeps coming back to me is I think we need local outreach. We need an outreach coordinator right here in town. Someone like they have down at the senior center. Somebody has a question about transportation or whatever the case may be, that they can pick up the phone and call somebody that can give them the proper information and have that available to Ashfield local.
Great observation. Great observation. Tom? You don't have anything?
No, I'm good.
Pam?
Ella. So, I don't know if I can remember my train of thought. It was about your percentages, being a percentage person. I'm a person. So I'm curious, if there is in excess of 800 seniors in Ashfield, I heard somebody say that, was that a wrong number?
Yes.
So how many seniors are there in Ashfield?
How many, 694.
Okay, 694. Still a whole lot.
But what's the number?
Still a whole lot more than 180. My question is, if the services were available here in town, what would happen to that 180? Would that 180 climb to 580? So I think that's, I get numbers, I get percentages, but I work with people. And we're talking about people who aren't accessing something. And if there's only 180 people making it to Shelburne, and it's available for them to get the transportation, why aren't more people accessing that center? Survey says.
Tom, Jackie?
I was just going to expand on the outreach coordinator idea. I think it's a great idea, but maybe it could be expanded into kind of a community check-in type of committee or group, but that there's no greater need for some of the elderly than to be checked in on. I also looked after an elderly neighbor for years and years and years until she passed away. And, you know, she didn't have the wherewithal to know what she needed or know what was here. And it takes a village. You need to check in on each other. So maybe coordinating doesn't necessarily have to be an a big expensive proposition. Maybe we put a committee together. Maybe some of the younger seniors can do some outreach and check in on others.
And Urian, you've been in the middle of this. Do you have anything to add, or what have you drawn out of this discussion except that it's kept you from doing something else?
Well, I'm thinking about a lot of things that we talked about, and I realize that a lot of the things that are already being done, people don't know about.
Yes.
And also, people have different ways of living. Some people are more reclusive and fine with that. Some people, you know, you don't know how soon or fast your life could change. And when that happens, you don't always know where to turn. And I think that brings people into getting help. And the staff at the senior center, which, by the way, we pay the $30,000, but the other towns pay too, so that's why we can afford to pay these people. And they're very good, they're very trained, and Leanne not only comes to St. John's, but she also will make home visits. You just have to call her, and she'll do whatever she can to help you out. And even though there are 3 towns supporting it, they come from other places. They come from Coleraine and Heath, and so she's still kind of directing what she can with that. So I don't think we could, I mean, we wouldn't, unless it was well coordinated, I don't think we could afford to actually support what you're already getting now for that kind of money. And it would have to be, I don't know, I think a lot about this. And I know people around here do help out their neighbors and stuff like that, but it's just this consistency of it, and a lot of people get a lot from being able to be part of the group and see other people. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. I haven't made any decisions yet, totally, and I think that we've worked hard. We've thought probably all these questions that have come up, we've thought about them over the last couple of years. We've got legal help, which is Donna Nichols, so you know who she is. And I still want to say that I'm not going to use more, but sometimes if we put our needs together, all of us benefit too. And I like the fact that there are other people from other towns, which I would never know if I hadn't been involved in it.
So I'm going to keep with my promise that we'll be out of here at 8:30. Todd, do you have anything that you'd like to add or discuss?
Well, I did attend the expansion committee's forum last week. I forget what evening, Wednesday evening I think it was. And you know, they presented multiple different ideas, and it seems that that's what's been happening for years now, since we've been talking about it. We've been presenting all kinds of ideas, and it doesn't seem like we don't know of any particular one that's getting any traction. So that's why, that was kind of the impetus for having this forum here, to find out what Ashfield seniors wanted. And if any one of the tracks that the Senior Center expansion folks were talking about would meet the needs of what you folks want. And I feel like there are as many questions now as there have been leading up till tonight. Not from what you presented, but what from the Senior Center Expansion Committee presented last week. We've got many different and some good ideas, but I still don't understand what direction we may end up going, or where the Expansion Committee wants to go. A lot more questions than answers at this point.
Steve?
I ended up having an absentee radio meeting last week for the
Same to me.
Yeah, saved you from that. I mean, we obviously have a lot of questions, but one of the things that I'm curious about too is with my generation, looking 15 years, down the road, who's going to be using a facility in the future? So it's not just in the immediate, like 5, 10 years, but if we're going to be paying, especially for, we start taking on capital, 350 to 700, plus adding operating costs, this is something that we're going to be utilizing in 15 years in the same kind of way as the next group of people coming through, the Gen X group going to be interested in the same kind of facility. And so just taking all these pieces into it, so we're not buying, potentially buying something. It's good for the current population right now. It has to be possibly flexible in the future. And so trying to quantify that is kind of a difficult thing because, none of us, a lot of us are really thinking, it's there, but we're not really, thinking about that. So we've talked about surveys and other things and trying to put something together, possibly in the future to kind of try to measure that somehow.
Great. So, Casey's made lots of notes here. Transportation, healthcare, housing, community services, health access, maybe doing some type of hybrid with what we're doing now with expanded outreach. That was brought up several times. Broaden the outreach, trying to do, I think that is hand in hand, right? The age in place and the outreach, community services. I brought that up in the community hall. I probably shouldn't have. That'll haunt me for years, probably. And, coordinating activities. I'm counting more times than not that we are talking about coordination and outreach being a bigger part of our needs.
That's that Delta change in outreach access model. So that's just shorthand for Casey.
And then
we have shorthand on the
and just so you know, when she stepped back here, she was just doing some cartooning.
No, I'm writing notes for myself.
All right, folks, 8:30. I'm not normally on schedule, but thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Although you might be frustrated.
Will there be a wrap up in the Ashfield ultimate? Thank you.
All right. So thank you. You're welcome to stay for the select board meeting, but it's going to be brief.
I've got notes for myself in the back so that I can start some follow-ups.
It's